Well, our guest speaker, Alex Sheen, he made a promise. And his cultural action taken while keeping that promise is resulting in global impact.
Alex Sheen has been sharing the importance of a promise with people around the world. He is the founder of Because I Said I Would, an international social movement and nonprofit dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept.
Alex Sheen, founder of Because I Said I Would.
Because I said I would.
Because I Said I Would.
Alex Sheen.
Alex Sheen.
Alex, nice to have you on.
It's all about making promises and keeping them.
Alex is someone who truly honors commitment.
The promises that we make this world. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Thank you. Thank you. I have a question for you. A question that you may have asked yourself at some point in time. Maybe this question has popped up in your mind when you're watching TV or the news, right? You see the story of an average everyday person all of a sudden is all over the headlines for some reason. Or maybe more commonly, you're flipping through that phone on social media and you see a story go viral. Have you ever wondered to yourself, I wonder what it's like to go viral, I wonder what it would be like to be that person who posted that thing that's everywhere now. Because we all have a thought, an idea we might want to share with the world, right? So let's say one day you decide, you know what? I'm going to write this out. Yeah, you decide, I got to get this out. I'm going to share this. And so you do. You write it all out. You log in. You press that button. You post this idea. And then you just go to sleep. But as you're sleeping, the view counts roll into the millions. You wake up and this message has spread around the world. All of a sudden, the local news, they're at your door. And they got questions for you about this post that you made last night. But it's not just the local news, it's the national news. They keep coming with the same questions over and over and over again. And eventually you find yourself on some talk show. And this bald dude named Steve Harvey is giving you a jacket with his name all over it, telling you to wear it, but you don't want to wear it because it's ugly. You take it because you're nervous. And then they stop calling it Cleveland, Ohio, where you're from. They call it Cleveland, USA, and then all the TED Talks and all this nonsense because of a single click. One button, and your entire existence, it fundamentally changes forever. Have you ever wondered to yourself, I wonder what it's like to go viral? Well, my name is Alex Sheen. I'm the founder of Because I Said I Would. And for better or for worse, I know exactly what it's like to go viral. I'd like to tell you the story of how that happened and what I learned from it. It's a story that actually starts with my dad, shown here. Getting a little bit chubby in this area, just a little bit, Dad. It was funny because I remember when I was like a little kid, like a real little kid. I remember looking up at my dad and being like, man, Dad, you are not good looking. And that was like a really unfortunate thought because I would grow up to look exactly like him. So that sucks for me, but it's true. My father was average looking. He was average a lot of things. We're not talking about some kind of war hero. My father didn't write books or run marathons. He was just a pharmacist in a hospital for 25 years. And sure, through his profession, he tried to help people, right? You work at a hospital, that's probably what you should do. But the truth is, if you would have ever known my father in some other life, you would never go home and talk about Al Sheen, right? He was far too average, too everyday, too normal for you to want to do that, right? Unnoticeable. Except for one thing. My father was a man of his word. To me and to my brother, when he said he was going to be there for you, he showed up. My father was far from a perfect person, but he kept his promises. And it turns out when it comes to keeping promises, well, it seems like a lot of people don't do that these days. And so, one day, my father, this kind of nerdy pharmacist guy, he's sitting at home and he hears his phone ring. So he goes and he grabs it, and and he turns it over, and it's the hospital calling. Well, of course, this is where he works, so he has to answer. So he swipes, he answers, and on the other line is a doctor, a friend of his that he works with. And in this phone conversation, my father is informed that he has been diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer. Now, my father was a go-down swinging kind of man. You know, he came to this country as an immigrant. And I say that because sometimes it's not so easy making it on your own. You have to develop some pretty tough skin to get by. And so with this attitude throughout his life, at this point of his diagnosis, my father elected for the most aggressive treatment, for radiation and chemotherapy. Now, a lot of people have obviously heard the phrase chemotherapy before, right? But not many people know what it actually is. You see, chemotherapy is quite literally a poison. It was developed prior to World War II, and it is based on a primitive concept. The thought is that you poison the body so deeply that the cancer simply cannot live in its conditions, but perhaps this is the only way to give the patient a chance. Now remember something for a second. My father was a pharmacist in a hospital for 25 years. He knew more about the drugs he was taking than a lot of people ever will. And with that comes a distinct knowledge, a scientific understanding of the odds that are against you. And in the case of my father, those odds were terrible. But sometimes we gotta go down swinging, right? And so my father, he took this treatment, this medication, and it actually started to work. You see, this tumor, this mass that grew so close to his heart that it was surgically inoperable, couldn't be cut out. Through this medication, though, it began to shrink. So small that you couldn't see it in any of these medical scans. They kept doing it on my dad over and over and over again, and even him, the most genuine of skeptics, I assure you. He deemed it some sort of miracle, that perhaps he was saved. Now, I don't know if your family's ever dodged something like this, but this is obviously good news, right? This is a positive turnaround for my father's health, so I feel like we gotta celebrate, you know? I went to college, I know how to celebrate, right? And so I go to my dad, I used to call him old man. I said, old man, listen, anywhere you wanna go, Dad, anything you wanna do, money is no object, we gotta celebrate this moment. It's an incredible turnaround. Okay, let's hear it, Dad. Where do you wanna go? What do you wanna do? What does he say? He wants Chinese food. The same damn Chinese restaurant every single time. No matter the occasion, he was kind of boring like that. You know how dads are, right? They got their routine, they like what they like, and so you just let him have it. It's his day. He gets to choose. So we go to this place called Sunflower that we've been to 7 trillion times, and his buddy owns it, and so whatever. But it was a good day, a good meal. The kind of day that obviously I think a lot about. And the kind of day that I wish I had just one more of. But as many of you have probably already noticed, I speak of my father in the past tense. The cancer would spread from his lungs into his liver, into his pancreas, and into his brain. On September 4th of 2012, it was a bright morning. The house that I grew up in as a child, as a grown man, I would go to his bedside and I'd play some music for him that I thought he might like. I held his hand, and with the best ability that I had as his son, I desperately tried to comfort my father as he died. Now, you and I, we are only strangers. And I do not know if you have ever lost someone that you have loved. I have. His name was Al Sheen. He had 2 sons, and I'm one of them. I was named after him. You know, in the course of all of our losses, we have so many questions. You know, like, why him and why now? Why does it have to be me and my family? And in this struggle, we are afforded very few answers. In my struggle, I was asked by my family to give my father's eulogy, to speak to his greatest characteristic, his greatest quality as a man. And I kept coming back to this thought, the importance of a promise. You see, too often in this life, people say things like, I'll get to it, or tomorrow. Well, I've learned that one day there is no tomorrow. And the promises that we make and we keep, and those we choose to dishonor, that is what defines us and our character. It always has. Long before my father was ever born, and long after I go, it is a single measure of honor. One that we use so quickly to judge other people, right? How they treat their promises. But perhaps quickly we should use this to judge ourselves. I would give my father's eulogy, and the title of this speech would be Because I Said I Would. I would talk about the importance of a promise at his funeral, and for the very first time that day, I would hand out one of these. I called it a promise card. On the front, it says, because I said I would. On the back, there is nothing else. It's very simple to use. What you do is you take a promise in your life. You know, maybe something small that you said today, or maybe it's something so deep that it defines part of your purpose for being on this earth. You write that promise on this card. You go to the person you're making that commitment to. You tell them, I'm going to fulfill this promise. And when I do, I earn this card back. This card is a symbol of my honor, my respect. It is my property, and I'm coming back for it. You go, you fulfill your promise. You come back to that person, you earn your card back, and you keep it as a reminder that perhaps you are a person of your word. Maybe someone like Al Sheen was to his sons. And so his funeral ends, and I go home. And the next thing I would do would set off a chain of events to the scope of which I may never understand. That's where the internet comes in. You see, I make this post online, an offer. I said that I would mail, like physically mail, I said that I would mail 10 promise cards to anybody, anywhere in the world, at no cost to anyone. Which was the dumbest financial decision I have ever made in my whole life. First lesson today, don't offer free stuff to strangers on the internet. I should go without saying. You see, this is the first set of 5 cards I ever sent out, 5 sets of cards. You know, 5 requests in a day is no big deal. You wake up early, you go to sleep a little late, a few here and there, it's no big deal. But that's 5 requests in a day. What if you were to receive 50? Or like overnight 500? Or you wake up one morning and now it's 15,000? What do you do then? Well, I would have to figure that out. And that is because since September 4th, 2012, the day that my father left, we have distributed over 9.81 million promise cards to over 153 countries around the world. And by request only. 153 countries. 153 countries. This card. I mean, the damn thing's in English. I don't understand. Like, literally, they don't all speak that. But it turns out it doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter the color of your skin, or how much money you make, who you love, or how old you are. We all understand the importance of a promise. It is something that is core and elemental to human existence. I would learn this lesson not just from my father, but from humanity itself. Because people would start to write promise cards and post pictures of their commitments. And maybe that's a promise to someone who's close to you, right? To like a family member. Like this young girl writes, I promise to make life worth living for my sister with Down syndrome every day of her life, and to take care of her when my parents are no longer able to. A promise can be in recognition of a simple fact. Like this young man in the Czech Republic, he is certain that somebody somewhere has got to need that half liter of blood more than he does. And so he commits to donating to help the sick or the injured. A promise can even be a random act of kindness. Like this 14-year-old girl in Brunswick, Ohio, writes, I will sit and make friends with the kids who sit alone at lunch. Because a lot of times we talk, she realizes that. We just talk, and it may not mean much to us, but to that other person, it could be the earth. And in other instances, I don't have to go into some kind of deep background story. You see the picture, you read the words, and you understand what a promise might mean to a family or to our country. But this card wasn't always used in the first way I described. Not always an exchange between two people. People started using them in creative ways, as personal reminders, or they would make these massive promise walls at schools, and humanitarian organizations, universities, to make the same promise together. And all along the way, I've tried to explain the humanitarian nature of what it is that we do. But sometimes things get lost in translation on the internet, right? Because the internet is a terrible place. And sometimes people use this card in goofy ways, right? Like, I remember this one dude wrote, at the beginning of the year, he wrote, I will get the Christmas lights down before Easter, right? Like, real strong stuff. And I guess the point is, I can stand up here I'm not trying to exaggerate, like hours and days, telling you 30-second stories, one after the other. But sometimes the stories are not so short. A promise can obviously be very deep. It could be all that we have left one day. And so I'd like to tell you the story of a man named Garth Callahan. Okay, Garth is about 49 years old. He lives just outside of Washington, D.C., actually closer to Richmond, Virginia. And he's this kind of like cheesy dad, right? Now, some of you may have cheesy dads. Some of you might be married to cheesy dads. Some of you appear to be cheesy dads. But this guy is like level 9,000, okay? Like, he dresses up as like full-blown Star Wars characters, right? And then he goes places. You know what I'm saying? Like this is not Halloween. This is like a Tuesday in Garth's life, right? And all along the way, he embarrasses his daughter, which is the primary function of a dad. And that's the most important part of this story. He's got one daughter, one child, that's it. Her name is Emma. Pictured here in the 2nd grade, pictured here in the 8th grade. Now, ever since Emma was about in the 2nd grade, she started receiving these little napkin notes in her lunchbox. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like little words of encouragement scribbled on a napkin from her dad. Right? Okay, so picture this. You're an 8-year-old girl, okay? Now, I've never been an 8-year-old girl, but some of you have, so just picture it with me, right? You're skipping to the lunchroom or whatever 8-year-old girls do to get around, And you sit at the lunch table, you take out the PB&J, the apple slices, the chips, right? And then you see something like this. Remember that guy who quit? Neither does anybody else. Like what? I'm an 8-year-old girl, Dad. Why don't you pump the brakes at 6 in the morning when you're writing these things? You need to relax. But he would keep writing them, and maybe it's an old quote, right? Like, yesterday's home runs don't win today's games. Babe Ruth, right? She played softball, so he thought this was good. And it is cheesy, but, it's not hard to understand his role as a parent, Garth. He's got to go to work. He's got to take care of the family, the finances, the home, all this adult stuff. And while that's happening, well, time waits for no one. His daughter grows up. From the 2nd grade all the way into the 8th grade, and now what? Well, she's got sports. That means practice. She has homework, and friends. You overlap their schedules and you realize that not much overlaps. I mean, how much quality time in a day does he even get with his daughter? An hour? Hour and a half? Okay, an hour and a half to take the most precious thing in his existence, his baby girl, and try to raise her into a leader. It's not so easy. So yes, the note is cheesy, but the guy, he tries. And over the course of all this time, it actually starts to mean something to Emma herself. Now, my father never wrote me any sort of napkin notes, and that's quite all right. But unfortunately, there is something else that Emma's father and my father there is something else they have in common. Garth has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, but it's in his kidney. He's sitting in a small white room, a doctor's office, hearing this news for the first time. He doesn't quite understand what it means. Stage 4 cancer of the kidney. So he talks to the doctor. He says, okay, well, we'll just remove the kidney, right? Chemotherapy, whatever that is. I got a daughter to take care of, and I don't have to explain that to you, but we'll just move forward, Garth says. The doctor looks him right in the eye and says, Garth, you are going to die of this. Garth is given an 8% chance of living past 5 years. These two pictures were taken 46 days apart. You see, when someone tells you that the ride, it's almost over, that your time on this earth is coming to a close, you begin to think about this concept of time and how we have spent it, what we are truly committed to. You begin to think about everybody that you love on this planet, and those are the thoughts that will go through Garth's mind. But oddly, in these thoughts, Garth would go and grab a bunch of calendars, and he would start this calculation, and he decided to write a promise card. Garth wrote, I will write 826 napkin notes for Emma. You see, that is one note for every day of class Emma has left until she graduates from high school. So that no matter what happens to him, no matter the day of the last goodbye, even if he cannot be there, that note, it's still going to be, because every single one of them has already been written in advance, just in case. Dear Emma, sometimes when I need a miracle, I just look into your eyes and realize that I have already created one. Love, Dad. But please, do not get me wrong about the point of telling this story about Garth. To me, this isn't a story about some good father. In fact, maybe your dad was never even there for you. This to me isn't about cancer, although I hope this disease never crosses your path. No, to me, this is about doing what you can with what you got. Because so often, even as we are little kids, we say to ourselves, when I grow up and I graduate. But then we graduate, and then all of a sudden it's, but when I get that first good job, though. And then we get that good job, and then it's when I retire. When what? When are we going to finally do some good with what little we have today, right now? When does that day finally come along? That's what Garth Callahan might ask me, and you. You see, I will sometimes receive thousands of messages from absolute strangers around the world in a single day. And stories like Garth's, they are not so easy to read. You know, I don't even know if I was born to be this so-called leader of Because I Said I Would. What I'm trying to say to you is you have to know who I was before all this started. Before I ever clicked that button, before it ever went viral, I was just some dude, you know? I was just some guy working at a software company, which is really, really stereotypical for an Asian guy. And yes, okay, I know karate, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is I really liked working at this software company. And I'm going to be cocky for just a second, and I apologize, but I was the youngest manager in an enterprise software company of over 1,500 employees. Fortune magazine, they have the top 100 companies to work for in the United States, right? We were on the list. I made a 6-figure income, 5-figure bonuses, 5-figure stock options, everything that my father came to this land for himself. I had that. But if you get a bunch of messages from people like that napkin notes dad, you stare me right in the face and try to tell me that this life is somehow just about money. Nah. Money is only a means to an end. And that end we must choose. And so I thought, maybe I should quit my job and start a nonprofit. Which is, a terrible idea. It's very hard. But at the beginning, it didn't even make any mathematical sense almost, like from a financial picture. I mean, this was the equation, what was happening. It was going viral, and I was taking tens of thousands of dollars of my paychecks, and I was spending it on stamps and envelopes, right? Yeah, that's funny to you, okay? It's funny to me. And so it didn't make any sense to leave my job because that's how I was paying for everything. Donations weren't coming in, and it was just whatever. But one day I would be pushed over the edge emotionally to quit by a letter that was dropped to my desk at work. It was anonymous, no one's name on it but my own. This letter would push me over the edge, and I would like to read part of it to you right now. I'm sitting at my desk at work, and I read, it's February of 2013. Hi, Alex. I've been keeping up with your blog. Because I said I would has really, really helped me through a rough patch. There have been lots of times where I didn't think life was worth living, and I almost took my life. Almost. I'm getting stronger every day, and a lot of that strength comes from a few promise cards I've written. I have lots of people who care about me. I'm a very, very lucky person. It took a lot for me to realize that I should be alive. I do have a purpose. I'm not sure if I would even be around if it wasn't for you and your organization, so thanks, Mr. Sheen. I know I'm supposed to write this on a card, but I want to promise you that I will not give up. Now, I'm not embarrassed at this moment, nor will I ever be, to say that I sat at my desk that day and I cried thinking about what my father might say about a promise like that. I thought to myself, who is this? Is it a friend of mine who just didn't want me to know what they were going through, so they left their name off of it? Or is it a complete stranger? 1,400 people, you can't know them all. More importantly, this letter gave me the courage to do what I knew already had to be done. And that was to leave my life of comfort, to go alone and help people in what little ways I know how. And so I asked for a meeting with my boss, just through email. She didn't know what this meeting was about. But I remember walking into her office with this letter in hand. She was sitting there at her desk, pretending to work, or whatever bosses are doing all the time. You know what I'm saying? So she's on Facebook. And I give her this letter. And I say, hey boss, if you could just read this letter, it would make it a lot easier for me to do what I have to do. And she says, sure, Alex, no problem. She unfolds this college-ruled piece of notebook paper, and she reads as much as I have literally just read to you right now. But then she stops. Almost like halfway through, she stops. She looks up at me, and she says, Alex, this letter is from my daughter. This is about her. This is her handwriting. This envelope you're holding, that's the kind of envelopes I have on my kitchen counter. When did she give this to you? You see, I didn't know this, but her daughter had been suffering through depression. You see, she was overweight, and she'd go to school, and kids decided that they were going to pick on her for that. And so she'd come home with this feeling of rejection and sorrow, not knowing what to do with her emotions. She began to cut herself. But you see, this family, they knew about promise cards long before the world. You know, sometimes with our bad habits, it's not about promising forever, but how about just not today? She would eventually end this habit of self-harm and ask an older student to drive her to the place where I worked, where her parents worked. She would sneak into our office like some kind of middle school ninja. And that letter would get to my desk, and that's part of the reason that I'm standing in front of you right now. I'm all in. I've tried to make him keep my own promises to charitable efforts, whether it's driving through the night to deliver disaster relief supplies for the victims of Hurricane Sandy, or promising kids with cancer, 20 tickets to Disneyland, but delivering 100. This woman looks like I just punched someone in the face. I walked across Ohio 240 miles in 10 days for the 3 Cleveland women who were kidnapped, to raise funding for them early on in their recovery. Looks like some kind of Asian Forrest Gump here. But I know that this movement and promises to change the world, it cannot be left to one man, and that's why we do character education programming in schools, teaching children concepts like honesty, self-control, accountability in the classroom. We make lesson plans, resources, videos freely available to teachers around the country that have been downloaded in over 840 schools. We've held assemblies with over 155,000 students who've sat in live programming, but it doesn't end there. Our mission to change this world has grown through chapters. Groups of students who make and keep promises to help others in need, but work to become better citizens through personal development. I know that because I said I would, can make a larger difference through our commitment. We are a social movement and nonprofit dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. I'm here to ask you to be a part of that movement, to take a promise in your life, to reflect on the commitments that you have made and take that next step. For this movement, it is not about me. It is not about my father. My dad, Al Sheen, he is gone forever. But you and I, we are still here. This is about you and the promises that you make and keep. And as you contemplate what you might take pen to paper with, a commitment that you might keep, I ask you to remember one final quote. A set of words that has helped me more than any other set probably ever has. Perhaps it will serve you when the time is right. It's from a guy named George Bell. It is short and simple, and it goes like this. You can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. Thank you.